Hello, my name is Emma. I'm 66 years old, and I wish I could tell you the story was easy to share. It began during what should have been one of the happiest days of our lives, my son's wedding. Instead, I watched in shock as my daughter-in-law splattered red wine all over my poor, loyal dog, covering him from head to paw in a sticky, humiliating mess. And what broke me wasn't just her cruelty. It was my son's reaction. He laughed. He laughed, pointing at Charlie as if my sweet boy were nothing more than a joke. "This stinky dog needed a bath anyway," he said. "Maybe now he looks presentable." My heart twisted. Presentable? My Charlie, who had never hurt anyone? I felt something inside me snap. I looked at them, my son, my new daughter-in-law, and realized something was terribly wrong. So I did the only thing I could. With my voice trembling but firm, I canceled their honeymoon on the spot, leaving them standing there horrified. It was the first moment they understood I wouldn't be treated like a fool, but that moment, it was only the beginning of something much darker, much deeper, and far more dangerous than I ever imagined. What happened next turned our entire family upside down. If you're curious to know why that wedding disaster was only the first warning sign and how everything spiraled from there, stay with me. But before we continue, make sure to subscribe to the channel and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I love reading your messages and knowing where you are. Now, let's understand how this story really began. I had been smiling through the wedding reception, trying to take in every joyous detail, when the world suddenly tilted on its axis. My heart nearly stopped as I saw Rebecca, my daughter-in-law, raise the glass of red wine above my beloved Charlie, who had been loyally trotting beside me all evening. Before I could react, the deep crimson liquid arced through the air and splattered across him from head to paw. My poor dog froze, trembling slightly, a pitiful figure drenched in a sticky, disgusting mess. My chest tightened painfully, as if someone had pressed a fist into my ribcage. My eyes filled with immediate horror, and I felt an almost physical ache seeing him like that. Then came David's laughter. Oh, his laughter. It was cruel, sharp, and completely devoid of compassion. He pointed at Charlie with an air of amusement, smirking as though this were some small joke to lighten the evening. "This stinky dog needed a bath anyway," he said, his voice casual, almost teasing. "Maybe now he looks presentable." I froze, my entire body rigid. "Presentable?" I hissed through clenched teeth, my voice low but trembling, edged with disbelief and fury. "Look at him!" My hands curled into fists at my sides, and then, before the room could swallow me up in awkward stares, I felt an almost instinctual surge of power and clarity. I walked toward them, my grip on Charlie tightening as his little body shivered in my arms. My voice shook, yet carried a sharp, controlled authority. "I am canceling your honeymoon gift to Hawaii," I declared, my words striking like cold steel across the reception hall. The color drained from Rebecca's face, and David's protest was loud, but empty. I had already turned on my heel and walked out, the sticky, sickly smell of red wine clinging to my clothes, the weight of Charlie in my arms grounding me. He whimpered softly, burying his wet muzzle against my shoulder, and I kissed the top of his head, whispering apologies I could never fully mean. Once home, I set about carefully bathing him, the warm water washing away the wine, but not the gnawing pit in my stomach. Charlie was unusually quiet, almost lethargic, and my heart refused to settle. I brushed the damp fur from his eyes and noticed the subtle tremors in his legs, small but unmistakable. Something was wrong beyond the wine, and my instincts screamed it. I called Dr. Peterson, the vet I trusted implicitly, and we rushed to the clinic. Charlie climbed into the car, his little paws reluctant on the seat, and I could feel his fear pressing against me. Every honk of another vehicle felt amplified, every bump of the road a threat to him. My mind spun, trying to locate where I had failed, what small window of time had allowed this tragedy to unfold. "Doctor," Peterson greeted us with a calm smile that did nothing to ease the tension coiling in my chest. He examined Charlie carefully, noting his vitals, his gums, his reaction to touch. "He's stable for now," he said gently, but his expression tightened as he reviewed the lab results. "But there's something concerning in his blood work. It's not related to the wine." My stomach sank, and a cold, clawing fear gripped me. I held Charlie closer, my voice breaking as I whispered, "What is it, doctor?" His eyes, normally bright and trusting, met mine with a hint of confusion and fear. I stroked his damp fur, silently promising him that I would do whatever it took to protect him. The reality of the evening, the humiliation, the cruelty, the betrayal, pressed down on me, heavy and almost unbearable. As I left the clinic, holding my trembling dog, I couldn't help but reflect on the cruel nature of the people I thought I could trust. My son, who I had raised with care and pride, had laughed at this moment of sheer horror. And Rebecca, not Rebecca, but someone I would soon discover was much more dangerous than a mere brat with poor manners had deliberately put him at risk. I clenched my jaw, a fierce determination building inside me. I would not allow Charlie to suffer, not from wine, not from malice, not from anyone. That night, I sat beside Charlie as he slept in a soft, towel-wrapped nest on the sofa. His eyes flickered open every so often, meeting mine with quiet trust, and I felt tears prickle behind my eyes. "I will keep you safe," I whispered, brushing his fur. "I promise, my sweet boy, no one will ever hurt you again." My mind replayed every second of the wedding reception, every laugh, every glance, every cruel comment. And I felt a surge of anger and sorrow intertwine. Even in my despair, I noticed subtle shifts in Charlie, the small nudge of his nose against my hand, the tentative wag of his tail when I looked at him. These tiny gestures reminded me that our bond was unbreakable. It was a bond forged through years of companionship, loyalty, and mutual love. And I knew that this bond would become our shield. I would soon discover that the threat extended far beyond a spilled glass of wine. But in this moment, with Charlie trembling yet alive in my arms, I resolved to face whatever darkness lay ahead with courage. I stroked his head, feeling the soft dampness of his fur and the gentle rise and fall of his chest, and whispered again, "We will get through this, my love. Together." As the night deepened and the world outside our little haven remained oblivious, I realized that the trials awaiting us would test not just my resolve, but the depth of love I had for my son, for my dog, and for the life I had fought so hard to protect. And somehow, amidst the horror and the heartbreak, a spark of determination flared. I would not bow to fear. I would not surrender. I would protect Charlie, and I would uncover the truth, no matter how devastating it might be. I could barely breathe as Dr. Peterson's words sank in. "Emma, Charlie has been slowly poisoned," he said gently, his hands hovering over the small terrier, as though afraid to touch him too harshly. "It's been happening for weeks. Small doses of rat poison, enough to weaken him, but not enough to be immediately fatal." My chest tightened so abruptly I thought I might collapse. Poisoned? My mind spun back to those weekends I had left Charlie and David in Rebecca's care while I volunteered at the soup kitchen. Every laugh and chatter in the bright, bustling room blurred with the memory of my absence at home. How had I been so blind? How could I have left him in danger, thinking it was safe? Dr. Peterson's expression remained calm but stern. Has anyone else had access to him? Anyone who might wish him harm? I hesitated, the words catching in my throat. I thought of Rebecca's constant complaints about Charlie, the way she rolled her eyes at his muddy paws, how she called him that filthy dog for tracking specks of dust into her otherwise pristine apartment. My stomach churned, my hands tightening around the edge of the exam table. I felt a raw mixture of anger, betrayal, and disbelief. Could someone so polite and seemingly refined really be capable of such malice? I picked up my phone with trembling fingers and called David. I needed to hear his voice, needed to feel a tether to reality, but my hope for concern was met with dismissal. "Emma, you're imagining things," he said. His tone was light, almost patronizing. "You've always been a little paranoid, but this is just illusions. You're overreacting." The line went dead, leaving only the pounding of my heart and the quiet whine of Charlie, who leaned into me as if sensing my inner turmoil. I lowered my forehead to his soft fur, inhaling the faint, familiar scent that always grounded me. "I won't let them hurt you, Charlie," I whispered, my voice breaking. "I'll protect you. I promise." Once home, I began methodically documenting everything. Each vial of Charlie's medication, the vet's notes, the receipts for his care I photographed and cataloged them meticulously. Each click of the camera felt like a heartbeat, a small act of control in a world that suddenly felt precarious and unsafe. The documents would serve as my armor, a tangible proof of the unfolding danger. Later that afternoon, I leaned on my front gate and spoke with Mrs. Henderson, my elderly neighbor who had always been quietly observant. She peered over her glasses, squinting at me with concern, and said softly, "I saw Rebecca at the hardware store last week. She bought a lot of pest control products, bottles and powders, all sorts of things." A shiver ran down my spine, cold and insistent. The pieces were forming a pattern I could not ignore. Rebecca's dissatisfaction, her obsessiveness over cleanliness, the small but frequent disappearances of Charlie from my line of sight during those weekends, it was all connecting in a way that made my stomach twist. My hands shook as I recalled the wine incident at the wedding. The cruel amusement in David's laughter, the sticky red chaos covering my poor, loyal dog. The thought that Charlie had been enduring more than that, silently, pained me deeply. That evening I made a decision. I would not leave things to chance. I ordered hidden cameras and began to plan their strategic placement around the house. If David and Rebecca visited again, I would know. I would see. I would protect Charlie no matter what. As I envisioned the setup, a mix of fear and determination settled over me. My home, once simply a place of comfort, became a fortress of vigilance. The night grew heavy and quiet, the soft hum of the city outside contrasting with the turmoil inside me. Charlie rested beside me, his little chest rising and falling, unaware of the magnitude of the danger that had shadowed him. My phone vibrated suddenly, cutting through the silence, and I froze. A message appeared. "Your son's new wife isn't who you think she is." I stared at the words, my hands trembling as I held the device. My mind raced. Who could have sent this? Was it a warning or a threat? The weight of it pressed down on me, but beneath the fear was a flicker of resolve, a spark of clarity. I would not falter. I would not allow this hidden cruelty to claim another moment of peace for Charlie or me. I reached down to stroke his fur, feeling his warmth, his trust, his unspoken courage. In that small, fragile being, I found the strength to continue, to fight, to uncover the truth. "We'll face this together," I whispered, pressing my cheek to his soft head. "I won't let anyone harm you again. I swear it." The room was still, but the night felt alive with possibility, with purpose. I could no longer pretend ignorance. The danger was real, lurking in the guise of familial smiles and polite conversation. But in Charlie's eyes, I saw hope, and that was enough to ignite the determination I needed. I would watch. I would document. I would act. And I would protect the one being who had always been my anchor, my loyal companion, my constant heart in a world suddenly fraught with treachery. I stared at my phone, my thumb hovering over the call button as though hesitation could somehow change reality. The number that had appeared in that mysterious text message blinked on the screen like a small beacon of possibility. I had to know who had sent it. My heart thudded against my ribs as I dialed, imagining the voice that might answer, the secrets that might unfold. But after a few rings, a cold, automated voice cut through the silence. The number was disconnected. My chest sank with disappointment, a quiet despair settling over me. Charlie, sensing my anxiety, nudged my hand with his damp nose. I reached down and stroked his soft fur, feeling the subtle tremors that still lingered in his little body. Treatment had started to help him, slowly restoring his strength, but the shadow of what had been done to him lingered like a ghost. He stayed close to me constantly, leaning against my legs or curling into my lap, offering silent comfort. His trust, so unwavering, felt like a tether that kept me grounded in the face of the storm I could not yet see clearly. The following Sunday, I forced myself into the role of the gracious hostess. I invited David and Rebecca for dinner, carefully crafting my tone to sound warm and welcoming, while inside, every nerve was taut with vigilance. Cameras I had installed discreetly around the house captured their every move, every glance, every smile. I smiled and laughed with them, all the while aware that a simple slip could reveal the danger lurking beneath Rebecca's polished exterior. Dinner began with polite chatter, but my senses were on high alert. Charlie sat beside me, his eyes flicking between the guests, ears pricked, muscles coiled with alertness. It was then that Rebecca, with a practiced air of clumsiness, let a few chicken bones fall near Charlie's paws. My heart jumped violently, a cold spike of fear running down my spine. I reached over quickly, removing the bones before Charlie could even notice them. Murmuring softly to him, "Not now, my love, stay safe." For the first time, Charlie growled. A low, guttural warning aimed squarely at Rebecca. My breath caught in my throat. He had never shown aggression before, not even at the neighbor's yapping dog or at the loud vacuum. This was different, protective, instinctive, a visceral warning that something was very, very wrong. I met his gaze, feeling the unspoken communication between us, a bond forged in love and trust. A silent promise that I would keep him safe as he kept me anchored. The dinner ended without further incident. David and Rebecca left with polite nods and forced smiles, oblivious to the storm of suspicion swirling in my mind. As soon as their footsteps faded, I reviewed the footage. My stomach dropped as I watched Rebecca lean over Charlie's water bowl, her fingers slipping something into it with a careful, calculated motion. The camera angle caught her perfectly, her polished demeanor masking the malice of her actions. My hands shook as I paused the video and leaned back, Charlie's head resting on my lap as I traced my fingers over his fur, whispering reassurances. But that wasn't all. My gaze wandered to another camera, catching Rebecca lifting her phone, her eyes flicking toward my desk where financial documents lay scattered. She snapped a photo, the subtle click deafening in my imagination. I felt a cold fury rise in me, mingled with a sharp sting of betrayal. My own son, who I had thought of as a protector of our family, seemed oblivious to this creeping danger, or perhaps worse, too blinded by affection to see it. I knew I couldn't face this alone. I picked up the phone and called Sarah Collins, a private investigator whose reputation for discretion and sharp instincts preceded her. I explained the situation with shaking hands and a voice barely above a whisper, recounting every incident, every observation, every flicker of suspicion I had noted. I included the footage, the photographs, the patterns I had noticed. Each word I spoke felt like laying a stone on a bridge I hoped would lead to safety, but trembled beneath the weight of uncertainty. Hours passed like a slow, drawn-out eternity. I paced the living room with Charlie at my heels, his soft pads soundless against the carpet, his presence a constant balm to my frayed nerves. I whispered to him, telling him that we were doing everything we could to uncover the truth, that he was brave and loved and would never be abandoned. I let myself cry quietly, small tears of fear, frustration, and relief mingling on my cheeks. Then the phone rang. My heart leapt into my throat as I answered, the familiar but commanding voice of Sarah cutting through the tense silence. "Mrs. Thompson, I found something you need to hear," she said, her tone firm yet empathetic. "3 previous marriages under different names. Your daughter-in-law. She is a professional con artist." I felt the room tilt, a dizzying mix of fear, anger and vindication flooding through me. All the warnings, the suspicions, the unease, they had been real. And yet, amidst the shock and the dread, there was a sense of relief. At least now I had clarity. At least now I could begin to protect Charlie, to shield David from manipulation, to confront a truth that had been hiding in plain sight. I held the phone to my chest, feeling Charlie nuzzle against me, his small body warm and trusting. I whispered to him, "We're not alone anymore, my love. We'll face this together." The enormity of the danger still stretched before me, vast and menacing. But for the first time, I felt a flicker of hope. There were allies in the shadows, and now, finally, I had a name, a strategy, a path forward. As night settled over the house, I wrapped my arms around Charlie, feeling the steady rhythm of his heartbeat against my own. Each breath, each pulse, each quiet sigh reminded me that even in darkness, there could be light. That courage was not the absence of fear, but the willingness to face it. And that love, the unwavering bond between a mother and her loyal companion, could guide me through the storm that lay ahead. The moment Sarah Collins stepped into my living room, I knew my life was about to change forever. Her eyes were sharp, but her expression carried a calm steadiness that reminded me I was no longer facing this storm alone. She had spent the past few hours digging, tracing breadcrumbs of deception that I couldn't yet see. And now she was ready to reveal what she had uncovered. "Emma," she began, her voice measured but urgent, "your daughter-in-law's real name is Rachel Winters. She's wanted in 2 states for elder fraud. She changes names, identities, and marriages as easily as some people change their coats." I felt a cold wave wash over me. Rachel Winters. The name sounded so ordinary, yet the weight behind it made my chest constrict painfully. I sank into the couch, Charlie immediately curling against my side, his head resting lightly on my lap. The connection we shared, the trust, the unwavering loyalty was the only thing keeping me anchored in that moment. "She has a pattern," Sarah continued, flipping open her laptop and showing me meticulously organized files, photographs, and documents. "She targets wealthy men with aging parents, isolates them emotionally and physically, and then orchestrates accidents or health crises to gain control over their assets. Your son isn't just a bystander, he's the target to get to your estate." My stomach turned. $2 million. The estate I had painstakingly built, the savings I had set aside for charity, for a safe and loving future for my animals, for the projects I wanted to see flourish, everything was suddenly in jeopardy. I felt nauseous, a tight knot forming in my chest, and I had to take a deep breath, resting my hand on Charlie's damp fur, as if the small pressure of his body could calm the storm raging inside me. Sarah's next words made my heart sink further. "She's been accessing David's laptop, researching your assets, planning every step meticulously. He might not even realize what's happening because of the manipulation. It's subtle, but effective." I wanted to run to David, to grab him and warn him, to tear the veil from his eyes, but Sarah shook her head gently. "If you tell him now, he might not believe you, or worse, he could be defensive. Right now, he's under her control. We need solid evidence before anyone can act." A sense of helplessness clawed at me, but I refused to let it dominate. Instead, I felt a fierce resolve ignite. We devised a plan to catch Rachel Rebecca in the act, to document every lie, every scheme, every malicious intention. Sarah's presence was a lifeline, a steady hand in the chaos. And together, we began to map the strategy that might finally save Charlie, David, and me from the insidious danger that had crept into our lives. I knew I needed to play my part carefully. The next day, I carefully staged a minor incident, pretending to have a small stroke while David and Rachel were present. The tremor in my hands, the faltering of my words, the momentary daze in my eyes, it was convincing enough to pull at their sympathies. David's face turned pale, and I saw genuine concern flicker across his features, even as Rachel's eyes lit up with something else entirely, a calculated, predatory satisfaction I could not ignore. I think I need to update my will, I murmured softly, my voice trembling but controlled. I looked at both of them, letting my gaze linger on Rachel, who leaned forward, anticipation gleaming in her eyes. I want to make sure everything goes exactly where it should. I've been thinking. I'm leaving everything to you both. The effect was immediate. David's hand hovered near mine, unsure, gentle, concerned. But Rachel's reaction was unmistakable, a glint of triumph, of possession, of someone savoring a victory before it was truly theirs. Her smile was too wide, her eyes too bright, and I could feel the weight of danger tightening around the room, pressing into my chest. I left the room to compose myself, retreating into the quiet sanctuary of the kitchen where Charlie was waiting, tail wagging ever so slightly, his presence a steady comfort. I whispered to him as I brushed his fur, "We have to be careful, my boy, but we will catch her, I promise." It was then, while retrieving a glass of water, that I overheard Rachel speaking in the bathroom, her voice low and cold, yet perfectly audible through the thin walls. "The old lady's almost ready. 2 months max, then we can speed things up." My blood ran cold. The words were simple, but the threat was unmistakable. My pulse raced, adrenaline surging through every nerve. I felt fear coil inside me like a living thing, yet beneath it a deep, simmering determination. I would not allow Rachel to succeed, to manipulate my son, to harm Charlie, to take what was mine through deception and cruelty. I pressed my hand against my chest, feeling the steady beat of my heart. And then my hand rested on Charlie, his fur soft and warm beneath my fingers. He looked up at me with trusting eyes, and I drew a deep, shuddering breath. We were not alone in this. We had strategy, evidence, and the courage to face what lay ahead. In that moment, I realized that survival required more than fear, required clarity, careful action, and unwavering resolve. I had to play the long game, for David, for Charlie, and for myself. Each quiet, determined step we took now would be crucial in bringing Rachel's true nature to light. As night fell and shadows stretched across the house, I held Charlie close, whispering reassurances to him, to myself, to the fragile but fierce hope that had begun to take root. "We will see this through," I told him. "We will not be victims. We will prevail, together." I had never felt fear so sharply as I did that evening, the cold realization sinking deep into my chest. Rebecca wasn't merely after my money. Her intentions were darker, more personal, more insidious. She wasn't just scheming to steal my estate. She was planning to harm me, to manipulate and control in a way that left no room for resistance. I could feel it in the way she studied me during dinner, her eyes too bright, her smile too measured, as though she were calculating the perfect moment to strike. I reached for the phone and called Margaret, my lifelong friend and confidant. Her voice, warm and steady, was a balm to my frayed nerves. "Emma," she said after I explained everything, "you have to be careful, but you're stronger than you think. You've faced storms before. This is no different, except now you have strategy on your side." I felt tears sting the corners of my eyes, a mixture of fear and gratitude swelling in my chest. Margaret's words reminded me that courage was not the absence of fear, but the willingness to act despite it. That night, I set about quietly changing my will. Each stroke of the pen was deliberate, thoughtful, almost ritualistic. I left everything to animal shelters, to charities that would honor the values I had fought to uphold all my life. I created a fake will, one that would please Rebecca and David's eyes, leaving everything visible in my study, carefully positioned as though it were simply waiting to be discovered. It was a delicate, balanced deception for protection, truth hidden in plain sight. Charlie, ever vigilant, became my constant guardian. He slept at the foot of my bed, ears twitching at every creak, every whisper, every sound that might signal the approach of danger. When I awoke in the middle of the night, his eyes met mine with steady reassurance, his presence a living shield. I whispered softly to him, "Thank you, my brave boy. We'll watch each other's backs, won't we?" His soft nuzzle was answer enough, a quiet promise that we were allies, protectors, and companions in this unfolding battle. I began to play into Rebecca's expectations, deliberately appearing weaker, more forgetful, more vulnerable than I truly was. I dropped small items intentionally, let my voice falter in conversation, and made mistakes in my speech that I carefully exaggerated. Each moment was a calculated performance designed to lull her into overconfidence, to make her underestimate me completely. Yet beneath the act, my mind remained sharp, every observation noted, every gesture recorded in the recesses of my memory. Sarah stepped in to pose as a home health aide, her presence both reassuring and strategic. She moved through the house with quiet efficiency, noting each interaction, each nuance, each subtle signal of Rachel's true intentions. Her watchful eyes were the counterbalance to my performance, documenting everything with precision and discretion. I could feel the weight of her gaze as a protective layer, an invisible shield that allowed me to navigate the house without fear of missing a single detail. David's behavior during this time puzzled me. He hovered with genuine concern, asking after my health, offering to help with meals, checking that I had taken my medications. Part of me wanted to believe he was simply a caring son, but another part of me trembled with doubt. Was he truly innocent, or had he been manipulated so thoroughly that he could no longer see the danger? Each smile, each gentle word, each hesitant touch carried ambiguity, and I found myself studying him with the intensity of a detective, looking for the tiniest cracks in his facade. One evening, as I opened my medicine cabinet to check Charlie's flea medication, my heart skipped a beat. Among the familiar bottle, perfectly arranged as always, was a small, unassuming prescription bottle labeled with my name. My hand shook as I read the label. These were not medications I had ever ordered or been prescribed. A wave of icy dread washed over me as I realized the contents, a dangerous cocktail of sedatives, strong enough to incapacitate, even harm. I sank to the floor, Charlie immediately at my side, nuzzling into me, sensing my panic. I held him close, whispering reassurances that felt almost absurd in the face of such a calculated threat. Yet in his presence, I drew strength. I could not let fear paralyze me when every second counted. I would not allow Rebecca to succeed, would not allow anyone to hurt my son, my loyal dog, or me. I carefully secured the bottle, then retrieved my phone to call Sarah. My voice was steady, despite the adrenaline surging through me. "Sarah, there's a new threat. Someone has left sedatives for me. I don't know if Rebecca knows I'll find them, but it's a clear escalation." Her calm response anchored me, reinforcing that we were a team, that each danger revealed another piece of the puzzle, and that we had a plan to counter every move. As I placed Charlie back on my lap, I felt a deep, visceral bond with him. He had been my protector, my companion, and now, more than ever, he was a symbol of the courage I needed to summon within myself. I whispered, "We'll get through this. My love. Together." Each heartbeat against mine was a reminder that love, loyalty, and vigilance were more powerful than fear. Night settled over the house, wrapping us in quiet shadows, but I felt a flicker of resolve ignite in my chest. This was not just survival. It was a stand, a refusal to allow cruelty and manipulation to succeed. Rebecca had underestimated me, and that underestimation would be her undoing. With Charlie by my side and Sarah's guidance, I felt a sense of quiet empowerment. The trap was set, the pieces in motion, and the game had only just begun. I asked David to meet me in the small, sunlit study at the back of the house, away from prying eyes and the subtle manipulation that had been quietly infiltrating our lives. The afternoon light filtered through the blinds, casting stripes across the carpet, and for a brief moment, the world outside seemed distant, almost irrelevant. Charlie lay at my feet, his head resting lightly against my ankle, ears twitching at every small sound. He had been a constant, steadying presence through the storm, and now, as I prepared to confront my son, I felt his reassurance like a shield. I held out a folder, the corners of which were slightly bent from frequent handling. Inside were the documents, photos, and evidence Sarah had compiled. Rebecca's previous marriages, her patterns of deception, the manipulations she had enacted in households she had infiltrated. My hands trembled slightly as I placed it on the desk between us. "David, you need to see this," I said softly, my voice laced with both urgency and tenderness. "I know you care about her, but this isn't just about money anymore. It's about safety hours, Charlie's, and yours." He glanced down at the folder, a shadow crossing his face, a hesitation I had never seen before. Then, slowly, as though the weight of reality had pressed too long upon him, he began to speak. His voice was tight, faltering, breaking at the edges. "Mom, I think I knew something was wrong. I didn't want to admit it. I didn't want to believe it." Tears filled his eyes, blurring the edges of the room, and he buried his face in his hands. I felt a pang of sorrow, seeing my strong, capable son reduced to this vulnerable state, the toll of manipulation and fear etched in every tremor of his shoulders. "It's not your fault, David," I whispered, moving closer to him. "You've been trapped in her web, just as I feared, but now we can act. We can fight back together." He lifted his head, tears streaking his cheeks, eyes wide and haunted. "She's been controlling everything," he admitted, his voice shaking. "Our finances, our friends. She isolated me, Mom. I couldn't tell anyone. And if I made her angry, she threatened to leave me, to ruin everything." The truth cut through me like a blade, a mixture of anger and sorrow burning in my chest. And then he said something that made my heart ache in a different way. "At the wedding, I laughed when she poured wine on Charlie. I laughed because I didn't want her to be upset. I was afraid, Mom. I was ashamed. I didn't know how to stop her." The weight of his confession hung heavy in the room. I knelt beside him, taking his hands in mine, feeling the warmth of his skin, the pulse of life that was both fragile and resilient. "David," I murmured, my voice thick with emotion, "there is nothing to be ashamed of. You were doing what you thought was right in a situation you didn't understand fully. But now we know. And together, we will make sure she can't hurt anyone else." He nodded, tears falling freely, and I felt a wave of relief and love sweep through me. In that moment, the barrier that had formed between us during months of manipulation and deceit crumbled. We embraced, holding each other tightly, both of us trembling. Both of us silently acknowledging the bond that had endured despite the insidious shadows that had crept into our lives. Charlie nudged his head against David's leg, a tentative gesture at first, then pressed his body closer, sensing the shift in our dynamic, recognizing the return of trust and protection. Once we had composed ourselves, David and I sat down with Sarah to devise a plan. We had to act carefully, gathering evidence that would leave no room for manipulation or doubt. The sting operation required precision, timing, and patience. David would continue to play the role of the dutiful son, acting unaware while I feigned decline, vulnerability, and dependence. Every action, every word, every gesture had to be part of the larger strategy. Charlie, attuned to every nuance, sensed the subtle changes in David's demeanor. He remained cautious, but I saw him nuzzle closer to David, sniffing, observing, and slowly re-establishing the bond that had been strained by fear and uncertainty. The trust between mother, son, and dog was fragile yet resilient, like a thread stretched taut but unbroken. Days passed with careful preparation. David maintained the appearance of concern, of obedience, while I allowed myself to be guided by strategy, subtly hinting at weakness, fatigue, and forgetfulness. Each moment was a careful performance, designed to lure Rebecca into revealing herself fully. I watched her closely, noting the gleam in her eyes, the subtle shifts in posture, the calculated gestures that betrayed her intentions. Then came the announcement that made my stomach tighten with dread. Rebecca, with that false warmth and calculated smile, told David and me over dinner, "I've rented a cabin for a family weekend at a remote lake. Just us, away from distractions. Isn't that exciting?" I felt a cold chill. The lake cabin, isolated, quiet, too quiet. The kind of place where two of her previous mother-in-laws had died in suspicious circumstances. My pulse quickened, fear coiling around me like a living thing. But beneath it, I felt determination, a simmering fire that would not be extinguished. I would not allow history to repeat itself. I placed a hand on Charlie, feeling the warmth and strength of his small body against mine. "We're ready, my boy," I whispered. "We'll be careful, and we'll catch her. Together." His ears twitched, his eyes focused and alert, a reflection of my resolve. The danger was real, and yet, for the first time, I felt the power of strategy, courage, and unity. We had uncovered the truth, acknowledged the fear, and found strength in our bond. David, once trapped by manipulation and shame, was now an ally, steadfast and resolute. Charlie, ever loyal, was our protector and confidant. And I, Emma, would lead us through this storm, refusing to be cowed by deceit, cruelty, or fear. The next weekend, we'd test every fiber of our courage, but we would face it together, hearts aligned, spirits unbroken, and a plan ready to expose the darkness that lurked behind Rebecca's false smile. The drive to the lake cabin felt like a journey into the unknown, each mile stretching the tension taut across my chest. David sat quietly beside me, his hand occasionally brushing against mine, a silent reassurance that we were in this together. Charlie sat on my lap, his head resting on my arm, his eyes alert to every passing shadow. Packing his things had felt like a small ritual, folding his blanket just so, placing his favorite toys into the duffel bag. Each item was a talisman, a reminder that he was more than a pet. He was my protector, my constant, the thread of loyalty that anchored me through the storm. We had spent the last week meticulously preparing for this weekend. Hidden cameras were installed in every room, recording devices positioned with careful precision, and remote access was set up so that Sarah could monitor everything from afar. She would coordinate with the authorities if necessary. Her presence a safety net that allowed us to move forward without fear that we were entirely alone. When we arrived at the cabin, the crisp scent of pine and the gentle lapping of water against the dock should have been comforting. Instead, I felt a chill, the air heavy with the weight of anticipation. Rebecca greeted us with exaggerated warmth, her smile almost too bright, too precise, as though she had rehearsed it for a performance she intended to perfect. She fussed over me immediately, offering carefully prepared meals and drinks, insisting that I try the new herbal tea she had made for my relaxation. Charlie, ever intuitive, refused to eat anything she offered. When she handed me a small cup of the tea, he knocked it from my hands, sending the warm liquid splashing across the table. His growl was low and warning, the kind of sound that vibrated through the chest, a protective signal I could not ignore. I watched him carefully, grateful for his vigilance, and pushed the cup aside without complaint. Later, when Rebecca left the room to make a call, I examined the drink more closely. The faint aroma of herbs could not mask the bitter undertone, the chemical tang that immediately set my instincts on high alert. I discreetly tested a small amount, enough to detect the sedative, where my heart clenched at the realization she had intended to incapacitate me, just as I had feared. Charlie leaned against my legs as though sensing my fear and lending me his silent strength. That night, I lay in the guest bedroom, pretending to sleep. My pulse was steady despite the adrenaline, every muscle taut, every sense alert. The soft sound of footsteps approached, deliberate and careful. The door creaked open slightly, and I heard Rebecca's quiet whisper as she moved closer. My hand slid to Charlie, and immediately he sensed the intrusion. A low growl reverberated from his chest, a sound filled with authority and warning. Rebecca froze. The room held a suspended tension, time stretching and contracting with every second. Charlie's growl deepened, and after a moment, Rebecca retreated quietly, closing the door with barely a whisper of movement. I exhaled slowly, feeling a mixture of relief and gratitude. My heart ached with the knowledge of what could have happened. Yet it swelled with pride for the small, courageous body at my side. The next morning, David and I reviewed the footage captured by the hidden cameras. The images were chilling. Rebecca had been examining the stairs, carefully loosening the railing as if rehearsing a scenario that could lead to a catastrophic fall. The calculated precision of her movements, the coldness in her expression, made the hair on my arms stand on end. Yet alongside the fear was a steely resolve, a realization that we now had concrete evidence of her intentions. The day continued with an unsettling veneer of normalcy. Rebecca acted the devoted, caring wife, making light conversation, insisting that I enjoy the outdoors, and offering to take Charlie for a walk along the dock. Her words were syrupy sweet, but my intuition, honed over weeks of careful observation and consultation with Sarah, screamed caution. When she suggested I take Charlie to the unstable dock, the hairs on the back of my neck stood on end. My mind raced, recalling the stories Sarah had uncovered 2 previous mother-in-laws, dead under circumstances eerily similar to what she was proposing. My hands gripped Charlie's leash tightly, feeling the reassurance of his warm body against my side. His steady breathing a grounding force in the churning sea of fear and determination. David glanced at me, his eyes reflecting the same mixture of worry and courage I felt. "Mom," he whispered, "be careful. We know now. We'll handle this together." The bond between us, tempered by vulnerability, fear, and the courage to confront the truth, felt unbreakable. Charlie barked once, sharply, as if echoing David's words, a sentinel ready to protect. We paused at the edge of the dock, the water dark and still beneath, reflecting the clouds and the looming threat of Rebecca's calculated intentions. Yet in that moment, I felt a quiet power rise within me. Fear could not paralyze me. It would not dictate our actions. I looked down at Charlie, feeling the steady beat of his heart against mine, and whispered, "We'll face this together, and we'll win." His tail wagged faintly, a small signal of shared courage and understanding. As we walked back toward the cabin, careful and deliberate, I knew that each step was a step toward reclaiming control, toward exposing the truth, toward survival and justice. Rebecca's trap was set, but she had underestimated the vigilance, loyalty, and determination that guided us. We were ready. Charlie, David, and I together, unbroken and steadfast. The lake, the cabin, and the looming danger were just the backdrop for a confrontation that would test our courage and our love. Yet ultimately, it would lead us to triumph. The morning light seeped through the cabin windows in soft, muted streaks, but I could not relax. The dock beckoned, a trap I would not willingly step into. I clutched Charlie's leash, feeling the warmth and weight of his body, and said softly, "I think I'll skip the walk today. My legs are sore, and I need to rest." David glanced at me, understanding immediately. Rebecca's expression flickered for a moment, a shadow of annoyance masked behind her practiced smile. She accepted my excuse with a nod, though the tightness around her eyes betrayed her irritation. I felt a prickle of apprehension in the air, a subtle shift that warned me something was coming. Minutes later, the door creaked, and a man entered the cabin, tall and imposing. Rebecca's voice, sweet yet measured, introduced him. "This is my brother Thomas. He'll be joining us this weekend." My heart sank. There was something in the way they moved, their gestures almost synchronized, that hinted at a connection deeper than mere family. David and I exchanged a glance, silent communication passing between us. I quietly pulled out my hidden phone and snapped a photo of Thomas while Rebecca's attention was focused elsewhere. David tapped out a quick message to Sarah, sending the image with a single word: check. Seconds later, Sarah's response came, confirming our fears. Thomas was not her brother. He was Rebecca's husband from her second marriage. They were partners, orchestrating something dangerous together. A cold dread settled in my stomach as the realization hit me. The plan had been meticulously crafted, two of them working in concert to create an accident scenario. The dock, the sedative, the loose railing, they had envisioned a seamless disaster, and we were standing right in the middle of it. Yet amidst the fear, I felt a renewed determination. We knew now. Knowledge was our weapon. Thomas, unaware that David had discovered Rebecca's true identity, engaged us with casual conversation, his demeanor polished, controlled, almost disarming. David played the part of the compliant husband, masking the tension coiled beneath his calm exterior. I nodded along, speaking carefully, each word a measured thread in our web of subterfuge. Meanwhile, Sarah coordinated quietly from her remote station, ready to call in backup at the precise moment we needed intervention. That night, as the cabin settled into a deceptive quiet, the subtle danger of our surroundings became evident. The faint hiss of the gas stove lingered in the air, an almost imperceptible sound in the dimly lit kitchen. Rebecca had left it on, perhaps as a test, perhaps as a prelude to a more sinister plan. I felt Charlie stir beside me, his body tense, muscles coiled, sensing the invisible threat that our eyes could not yet fully comprehend. A soft whine escaped him. Then his growl rose, low and urgent, vibrating through the room. He nudged my hand with his nose, eyes wide, scanning the air. I sat up immediately, sniffing the faint metallic scent of gas that had begun to permeate the room. My pulse quickened, fear and adrenaline mingling into sharp clarity. David stirred, his senses alerted by the subtle cue, and we leapt into coordinated action, opening windows, turning off the stove, and guiding each other through the haze of danger. Charlie barked frantically, refusing to be calmed, moving between us as if forming a living barrier against the unseen threat. His vigilance saved us from carbon monoxide poisoning, a silent hero whose intuition had anticipated danger before human perception could. My heart swelled with gratitude and awe at the courage contained in such a small, loyal body. The next morning, after the initial panic had subsided, I confronted Rebecca quietly in the kitchen. My voice was calm, but underneath it carried the weight of fear, anger, and the authority of a mother who would protect her family at all costs. "Rebecca," I said softly, "the stove was on all night. That could have killed us. What were you thinking?" Her smile faltered for a fraction of a second before regaining its polished veneer. Thomas, standing silently behind her, suddenly drew a gun. The subtlety of their previous threats was gone. The mask of casual cruelty had been replaced by raw, immediate danger. My stomach dropped, but Charlie pressed close to me, his warmth and strength grounding me. David's hand found mine beneath the table, a silent affirmation that we would face this together. The cabin, once a place of scenic escape, had transformed into a crucible of fear and courage. Every glance, every gesture, every breath was loaded with tension, yet beneath it, a thread of hope persisted. We had uncovered the truth. We knew their intentions. And now, faced with the reality of the gun, we were no longer merely reacting. We were poised, alert, and ready to act with precision and courage. I looked into Thomas's eyes, steady despite the adrenaline, and then at Rebecca, whose false confidence now seemed fragile and brittle. Charlie growled again, low and warning, his body tense, and I realized something profound. Fear had not diminished us. It had sharpened our senses, bonded us closer, and prepared us for the confrontation that would define the weekend. In that moment, I understood that courage was not the absence of fear, but the decision to act despite it. The stakes were higher than ever, yet within the fragile human threads of love, trust, and loyalty, we found strength. David, Charlie, and I were aligned, hearts and minds focused, ready to navigate the danger, protect each other, and finally bring the deception, cruelty, and manipulation to light. The air in the cabin grew thick, heavy with tension, and the sharp tang of fear. Thomas's gun was steady in his hand, the cold metal gleaming in the muted light, aimed squarely at David. My stomach dropped, my heart hammering in my chest as if trying to escape. Every instinct screamed at me to protect my son, to act, to somehow neutralize the danger that had crashed into our carefully laid plans. Thomas's voice cut through the silence, sharp and commanding. "Sign over your assets now, or I shoot him." David froze, his eyes wide and terrified, and I felt a pang of helplessness that threatened to paralyze me. But beneath that fear was a burning clarity. I would not give in. I would not let fear dictate the end of our story. My voice trembled as I spoke, a fragile shield of compliance masking my racing mind. I need to think. This is all so sudden. I took a deep, steadying breath, keeping my tone uncertain, slow, hesitant. Every second that passed was precious. Rebecca's expression shifted dramatically, the sweetness of her earlier demeanor melting into a cold, cruel mask. Her lips curled, and the malice in her eyes was almost tangible. "Don't waste my time, old lady. I can do this all day, and you know it." Her voice carried a venom that made my skin crawl. It was as though the mask of civility had never existed. I was seeing her true self, raw and dangerous. Charlie, ever alert, pressed close to my side, his muscles coiled like springs, ears perked, eyes locked on the threat. Suddenly, with a ferocity that sent a shiver down my spine, he lunged at Thomas. His teeth sank into the man's leg, eliciting a sharp, surprised cry. The gun clattered to the floor, sliding across the wooden planks as Thomas yelped and stumbled backward, momentarily unbalanced. My heart raced, equal parts terror and relief, as I realized the immediacy of our salvation lay in the bravery of my small, loyal companion. Before I could gather my thoughts, the cabin door burst open, and a figure entered swiftly. Lisa. My breath caught in my throat. The anonymous text sender, the source of the mysterious warnings that had guided me through weeks of fear and uncertainty, stood before us. Her eyes, wide and determined, scanned the room, and I saw the glint of a wire clipped discreetly to her clothing. She had been tracking her mother's crime spree for years, meticulously gathering evidence in an effort to stop her, and now she had arrived at the perfect moment. Police and FBI agents poured into the cabin behind her, their presence immediate and commanding. The sudden influx of authority and justice sent a wave of relief and awe through me. I looked at David, who was trembling but holding himself with the tiniest thread of regained composure. Charlie, still at my side, growled softly, as if acknowledging that our danger was finally being confronted. Rebecca shrieked, her voice cutting through the room like shattered glass. "You don't understand." "You haven't won, Emma." She spat venomously, her eyes wild and frantic. Her rage filled the cabin as officers moved to restrain her, but her words froze in my mind. The fear that she might have acted again, the possibility that Charlie's life was at risk gnawed at me even as relief washed over the rest of the room. Thomas struggled as well, cuffed and subdued, his prior confidence shattered. The coordinated menace that had haunted us for days crumbled in the presence of law and loyalty, leaving only the stark reality of consequences. I watched the two of them, no longer untouchable, no longer in control. And yet, in that moment, my mind returned to Charlie, my steadfast, intuitive, courageous companion, who had risked everything to protect the life of my son and me. Lisa approached me, her expression a mixture of urgency and regret. "Mrs. Thompson, I'm so sorry. I didn't know if you'd survive until we could get here." Tears glistened in her eyes as she reached out, her hands trembling. "My mother abandoned me when I was 12. I've been trying to stop her ever since. I didn't want anyone else to be hurt the way I was." Her voice cracked, raw with emotion. I took her hands in mine, feeling the shared bond of a life impacted by cruelty, yet transformed by courage and action. The officers led Rebecca and Thomas away, their shouts and threats echoing through the cabin. Rebecca, her voice rising above the chaos, fixed me with a look of pure malice. "You haven't won, Emmy. I already poisoned your precious dog again. He has hours, maybe less." Her words struck like ice, a cruel reminder that the fight was not entirely over, that vigilance was eternal. Charlie whined softly, pressing close to me, and I held him, heart hammering, whispering reassurances, promising that we would protect him as fiercely as he had protected us. In that moment, I understood something profound. Courage, loyalty, and love had carried us through the most terrifying ordeal of our lives. The threat of harm, the layers of deception, and the imminent danger had forged bonds stronger than fear, stronger than despair. David, Charlie, and I, joined by Lisa's bravery, had faced darkness together, and though Rebecca's final words cast a shadow of uncertainty, we had emerged alive, unbroken, and resolute, ready to continue the fight, not just for ourselves, but for every innocent life threatened by those who prey on the vulnerable. We held each other close, the cabin filled with the sound of our shared breaths, the quiet whispers of gratitude, and the steady, calming presence of a small dog whose bravery had proven immeasurable. In that fragile peace, I felt the first real hope in weeks, the hope that truth, courage, and unwavering love could overcome even the most calculated cruelty. My hands shook as I scooped Charlie into my arms, cradling him like he was the most precious thing in the world. The words of Rebecca's threat still echoed in my ears, sharp and cruel. "He has hours, maybe less." Terror gripped my chest with icy fingers, constricting my breathing as I raced down the winding roads to Dr. Peterson's clinic. Charlie whimpered softly, his small body pressed close, but I could feel the steady beat of his heart against mine. Each pulse was a reminder that he was alive, that I still had a chance to protect him. The vet's office was bright and sterile, a stark contrast to the chaos that had gripped me. Dr. Peterson met us with a grave expression, but there was a flicker of reassurance in his eyes. "We'll do everything we can," he said calmly, guiding Charlie to the examination table. His hands moved with practiced precision, gentle but efficient, as he administered the tests, ran blood panels, and monitored Charlie's vitals. I stood close, stroking his fur, murmuring softly, trying to impart courage through the rhythm of my voice. David and Lisa hovered nearby, their own tension palpable. David's hand found mine, and we held it tightly, a silent anchor against the storm of fear. Lisa, though younger, radiated a quiet determination, her eyes glistening with concern for both Charlie and me. Time seemed to stretch, each second pregnant with uncertainty, each tick of the clock a hammer blow to our nerves. I whispered words of comfort to Charlie, words that were as much a prayer as an attempt to soothe him. "You're strong, my brave boy. Just hold on a little longer." Finally, Dr. Peterson emerged, wiping his hands on a towel, his expression softening into a smile that seemed almost miraculous. "He's perfectly healthy," he said. Relief crashed over me like a tidal wave. Rebecca never had the chance to poison him again. "He's safe." Tears streamed down my face as I hugged Charlie, feeling the warmth of life, the proof that courage and vigilance had triumphed over malice. Weeks later, the courtroom became our arena for justice. I testified with clarity and conviction, recounting the horrors, the manipulations, and the threats that had shadowed our lives. David sat beside me, visibly healing, his posture steadier than it had been in months. Lisa provided crucial testimony, her experience and evidence painting a full picture of the crimes committed by Rebecca and Thomas. When the verdict was read, announcing lengthy prison sentences for attempted murder, fraud, and elder abuse, a wave of vindication and relief washed over us. The weight of fear, guilt, and uncertainty began to lift, replaced by a profound sense of justice served. Life gradually returned to a rhythm imbued with healing and purpose. Lisa became a regular visitor, her presence a balm, a granddaughter I had never had but now welcomed fully into my heart. David attended therapy sessions, slowly unlearning the chains Rebecca had imposed, rebuilding not only his own sense of self, but also the bond between us. Charlie remained ever vigilant, a furry guardian and confidant, his loyalty unwavering. In the months that followed, I established a foundation dedicated to protecting elderly individuals from financial predators. Charlie became our therapy dog, visiting senior centers, bringing comfort and companionship to those who, like us, had faced deception and fear. I volunteered at support groups, sharing my story with trembling voices and hopeful hearts, helping others find the courage to confront those who sought to harm them. Sunny afternoon, I sat on my porch with Charlie resting peacefully on my lap, his soft warmth grounding me in the present. David sat beside me, his hand brushing against mine, a silent testament to our renewed connection. Lisa approached, carrying a tray of lemonade, her smile bright against the golden light. Margaret, ever the joker, leaned against the railing, quipping, "I think Charlie deserves a medal for all he's done." I laughed softly, scratching behind his ears, marveling at the quiet heroism contained in such a small, faithful creature. As I looked around at my little circle of healing, my son, my steadfast dog, the brave girl who had risked everything to protect us, I realized something profound. The terror, the manipulation, the near tragedy had all forged bonds stronger than any fear could break. Standing up to injustice, though terrifying and exhausting, had brought us together, united in resilience, courage, and love. A letter arrived that afternoon, a simple envelope bearing a name I did not recognize. With Charlie at my side, I opened it carefully. Inside was a note from another elderly woman who had heard of my story. She wrote about how she had found the courage to report her own abusive situation, inspired by the strength and perseverance she saw in my journey. Her words resonated deep within me, a quiet affirmation that the smallest voices, those that speak from love, integrity, and bravery, can indeed make the biggest difference. I smiled, gently scratching Charlie's ears, feeling the soft rise and fall of his breathing against mine. Sometimes, I thought, the battles we fight, the dangers we face, are not just for ourselves. They ripple outward, touching others in ways we may never fully see, nurturing courage, hope, and resilience. In that serene moment, with the sunlight bathing the porch and the laughter of family mingling with the warmth of new beginnings, I knew that despite everything, we had won, not just against the malice that had tried to destroy us, but for the chance to live with honesty, love, and unshakable connection. And as the afternoon sun glinted off the edges of Charlie's fur, I whispered softly, "Sometimes the smallest voices make the biggest difference," feeling a quiet satisfaction and the gentle promise of a life reclaimed. If you found Emma's journey inspiring, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories of courage, hope, and triumph over adversity.